The night had a way of mocking Chief Williams Obin at the Lagos. Skyline glittered with the deceptive promise of peace, but beneath the neon glow, shadows always stirred. It was almost midnight when Williams finally stepped out of the governor's sprawling mansion, the faint echo of music and laughter spilling into the humid air. The banquet had dragged on far too long, and so had his patience. His face ached from hours of forced smiles, the type of smiles politicians exchanged, like counterfeit currency, cheap, glittering, and empty. His head throbbed from too many glasses of champagne he hadn't wanted but couldn't refuse. In truth, all he wanted now was silence, his bed, the cold kiss of air conditioning, maybe a neat glass of aged whiskey to lull his spirit into something resembling calm. But Lagos never slept, not truly. The streets whispered with danger, and Williams knew it, as his driver pulled the car to the front of the mansion. Williams inhaled deeply, adjusting the silk lapel of his designer suit. Every inch of him screamed success: the tailored clothing, the polished cufflinks, the subtle cologne, but beneath that facade lay exhaustion, and perhaps something darker. The governor had spoken of new contracts, new deals, new partnerships. Men had clinked glasses, eyes glittering with promises they had no intention of keeping. Women had paraded in glittering gowns, laughing too loudly at jokes that weren't funny, their eyes darting toward the most powerful man in the room at any given moment. Williams had played his role, smiled, toasted, lied when he had to. Now he wanted out. Out of the noise, out of the politics, out of the suffocating performance. He slid into the plush leather backseat of his car, shutting the door with a quiet sigh. For a moment, the faint thrum of the city outside felt distant, like a song fading away. The driver glanced back at him, awaiting instructions. "Home," Williams muttered, his voice low and tired. The car pulled forward, gliding through the high-security gates and onto the open road. For the first few minutes, Williams allowed himself to sink into the quiet. His eyes drifted to the window, watching Lagos pass by in streaks of neon and shadow. Street vendors still lingered on corners, their lanterns glowing like tired fireflies. Motorcycles zipped between cars recklessly. Farther down, the faint sound of Afrobeat pulsed from a roadside bar, mingling with the honks of impatient drivers. Williams rubbed his temple. He hated this city and loved it in equal measure. It gave him everything: wealth, influence, fear, but demanded his soul in return. The car turned onto a quieter road. Williams closed his eyes, imagining the peace of his estate waiting for him. The wide gates, the manicured lawns, the stillness. Maybe, if he was lucky, Juliana would be asleep already. Juliana. Juliana. The name alone made his jaw tighten. His wife was beautiful, too beautiful, in fact, with eyes that had once melted him but now only burned. She was young, fiery, and endlessly dissatisfied. She could command a room as easily as she commanded him, and that thought made his stomach knot. He had given her everything: luxury, security, a life others could only dream of. But Juliana was like fire, always hungry, never still, always threatening to consume everything around her. Sometimes, in the dead of night, Williams wondered if marrying her had been a mistake. But tonight, even she felt distant. Tonight was about silence, solitude, rest. He leaned back against the seat, loosening his tie, his mind slipping into the dull comfort of half-sleep. The city blurred past. The hum of the tires against the asphalt was hypnotic. And then, sound. So faint, he almost dismissed it. A rustle, a shift of fabric, a presence. Williams's eyes snapped open. He sat upright, heart slamming against his ribs. Slowly, he turned his head toward the empty shadows of the back seat. But the seat wasn't empty. A figure sat there, half hidden in darkness. For a split second, Williams thought his mind was playing tricks on him. But then the figure moved. Deliberate, unmistakable. A woman, his breath caught. She was curled in the corner of the car like a wounded animal, her knees pulled tightly to her chest. Her clothes were torn, clinging to her like second skin. Her hair fell across her face in messy strands. But even in the dim light, he could see her, eyes wide, fearful, and burning with something between defiance and desperation. Williams's voice came out sharp, a whisper that still felt too loud. "Who the hell are you?" The woman flinched, pressing herself tighter into the corner. Williams's hand twitched toward the door handle, then froze. His driver hadn't noticed, or maybe he had. The air in the car thickened. Every second stretched like an eternity. The woman finally spoke, her voice hoarse, trembling. "Please, don't send me back." Williams's stomach sank. His mind spun with questions, with dread, with possibilities he didn't want to imagine. But one thought screamed above them all. Who was she running from? The city slept under a blanket of neon glow, but in one room, the night was far from peaceful. Chief Williams sat alone in his study, the dim yellow lamp casting shadows on his face. His glass of whiskey trembled slightly in his hand, not from weakness, but from the storm raging inside him. Juliana's kiss still burned on his lips. The thrill of conquest, the danger of betrayal, it was intoxicating. But beneath the ecstasy lay something darker. Fear of being discovered, fear of losing everything he had built over decades of power, reputation, and wealth. He leaned back in his leather chair, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, sounding louder than ever. The mansion was silent. His wife had already gone to bed. His guards were outside, the servants asleep. And yet, the silence screamed at him. "What have you done, Williams?" he whispered to himself, running a trembling hand through his thinning hair. "You've opened a door that may never close." But then another voice answered, low and sly, not from outside, but from within him. "Or maybe you've opened the door to freedom, power, and pleasures you've been denied for years." Williams stood and walked to the balcony, overlooking his estate. The night breeze carried the distant sounds of Lagos car horns, laughter, sirens. The world moved on, unaware of the storm brewing in his house. He thought of Juliana, her eyes filled with hunger and defiance, her words laced with poison and sweetness. "She's dangerous," he muttered. "And that is why you cannot let her go," the voice replied. For the first time in years, Chief Williams felt alive, but it was the kind of life that devours men whole. Meanwhile, in a modest flat on the mainland, Juliana lay awake on her bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above her. A smile played on her lips as she replayed the evening's events in her mind. The way Williams had crumbled, the way he had kissed her like a man starved for years, she whispered to herself, her voice silky and venomous. "Men like him, they think they control the world, but once they taste a woman like me, they are finished." Her phone buzzed, a message. She reached for it lazily. "Williams, are you awake?" Her smile widened. She typed back quickly. "Juliana couldn't sleep, thinking about you." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. She chuckled softly. Hooked already. Juliana was not in love. No, love was weakness. What she felt was power. Every word, every glance, every kiss, it was all part of her game. And she played to win. But what she didn't know was that she was not the only one who could play with shadows. Williams had lived too long in the dark corridors of politics and power, and though he was trapped in her web now, a part of him was already calculating, already planning what would happen when the game turned dangerous. Because one thing was certain, it would. The following morning, Williams's wife, Madame Ephraim, entered his study without knocking. She had been his partner for nearly 30 years, a woman of sharp mind and sharper intuition. She knew her husband better than he knew himself. "Williams," she said, her eyes narrowing at the untouched breakfast on his desk. "You didn't sleep." He looked up, startled, then forced a smile. "Too much on my mind. Business." Ephraim's gaze lingered on him. She could smell lies the way a hunter smells blood. But she said nothing. Instead, she turned and walked out, her silence louder than accusation. Williams exhaled, sweat breaking out on his forehead. Ephraim was no fool. If she discovered even a hint of his affair, the fallout would be catastrophic, not just for his marriage, but for his entire empire. But even knowing that, when his phone buzzed and Juliana's name flashed on the screen, his heart leaped with forbidden excitement. "Good morning, Chief," her message read. "Last night was unforgettable. Shall we make it happen again? Soon?" Williams closed his eyes, torn between dread and desire. He knew the answer before he typed it. "Tonight. Same place." And just like that, the shadows grew darker. The night in Lekki stretched endlessly, heavy with secrets. The city outside was still awake, bars buzzing with music, cars honking on distant roads, and the faint chatter of lovers strolling along the waterfront. But inside Williams' mansion, silence ruled. Williams sat in his dimly lit study, his glass of brandy untouched. The chandelier above him threw long shadows across the polished wooden table. His mind wasn't in the present. It was buried in memories he had tried for years to silence. but that now returned with sharp claws. Juliana's words echoed in his head. I've lived a life most would call cursed. I was just a girl when I learned that love could kill. He closed his eyes, her trembling voice replaying in his ears. He had seen many liars, manipulators, and schemers in his life, but there was something raw and broken in her tone, something that refused to be dismissed. Earlier that evening, Juliana had confessed only fragments of her story before she retreated into silence. Williams had wanted to press further, but he could see the walls she had built around her heart. Forcing her would break her, and Williams, surprisingly, didn't want that. But now, alone with his thoughts, the fragments she had revealed were enough to stir his curiosity. Juliana had once loved a man named Emeka, a childhood sweetheart who had promised her forever. But Emeka wasn't just any man. He was the son of a powerful Lagos politician, a man whose enemies were as numerous as his allies. Their love was fiery, forbidden, and dangerous. When Emeka's father discovered the affair, Juliana's world collapsed. Overnight, Emeka was taken from her first abroad to study, kept away under heavy surveillance. Juliana was left alone, but her suffering didn't end there. Rumors swirled that she had been responsible for betraying Emeka to his enemies, a lie that painted her as a traitor. The whispers spread like wildfire. She became an outcast in her community, branded a snake, a betrayer. Doors closed on her, friends abandoned her, even her family, fearing political retaliation, distanced themselves. Juliana's life became a nightmare, and then tragedy struck. Emeka returned years later, broken and consumed by anger. He believed the rumors. He accused Juliana of betrayal. Their final meeting ended with harsh words and tears that burned like acid. Hours later, Emeka was found dead in a mysterious accident. From that day, Juliana carried guilt like a second skin. She had not betrayed him, but the world believed she had, and that was worse, being punished for a crime she didn't commit. Williams leaned back in his chair, running his hands over his face. He knew betrayal. He had lived it, breathed it. But Juliana's tale was not just betrayal, it was tormented. She telling me the full truth, he wondered. Or is this just another mask, another performance? He wanted to dismiss her, to shut the door on whatever bond was forming between them. But deep inside, something gnawed at him, something human, something he thought he had buried years ago. For the first time in years, Williams felt pity. As the clock struck midnight, a soft knock interrupted his thoughts. The door creaked open, and Juliana stepped inside. She wore a simple robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. The firelight painted her face in a fragile glow. I couldn't sleep, she whispered. Williams gestured to the chair across from him. She sat, curling her legs beneath her like a child seeking comfort. For a long moment, silence hung between them, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Finally, Juliana spoke. You're wondering if I'm lying. Williams didn't answer, but the flicker in his eyes was enough. I don't blame you, she continued. People have looked at me with that same suspicion for years. I've learned to live with it, but I don't care if the world doubts me. What breaks me is that I doubted myself. I asked myself every day, did I do something that led to his death? Did my silence kill him? Her voice cracked, and for the first time, Williams saw tears spill freely down her cheeks. Williams stood, moving toward the window. He didn't like emotions, they made him weak. He had built his empire on control, on mastering every detail, every outcome. But here was Juliana, unraveling before him, pulling him into a storm he had no power over. You should sleep, he said finally, his voice rough. Juliana rose, slowly walking toward the door. But before leaving, she paused and looked back at him. You may think I'm cursed, Williams, she whispered, but maybe you're the one cursed to live with walls so high that no one can climb them, not even yourself. With that, she left. Williams stood in silence, the weight of her words pressing down on him. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like the predator in control of the game. He felt like the prey trapped in emotions he had long sworn off. Outside, the wind howled through the palm trees, carrying with it a warning. This was not just the story of Juliana's curse. It was the beginning of a fire that would consume them both. The night in Lekki was heavy, as though the air itself carried secrets too dark to breathe. The once vibrant mansion of Williams now stood like a fortress, cloaked in silence but vibrating with unseen tension. The gala at the governor's house seemed like a dream from another life. Now, in the quiet of his home, shadows whispered louder than any laughter. Williams sat alone in the grand study, a room lined with books he had never read and paintings bought only for prestige. A single glass of whiskey glowed amber in the dim light, untouched. His hand trembled slightly as he tapped the glass, staring not at the drink, but at his reflection in it. His eyes were hollow, searching for answers in the swirl of liquid. The memory of the night before pressed upon him like a nightmare. Juliana's cold voice on the balcony, her grip on his heart as she revealed truths that made his empire feel like sand slipping through his hands. But tonight, Williams was not the same broken man. Tonight, something darker stirred within him. A faint knock came at the door. His loyal aide Chike stepped inside, eyes darting nervously. "Sir, we found the trail. The men loyal to the governor's faction are watching your every move. It is no longer safe." Williams leaned back, a humorless smile curling his lips. "Safe," he muttered, his voice rough. "Chike, safety is an illusion. What matters is control, and control is slipping." Chike shifted uneasily. He had never seen Williams this way more beast than man, his charm stripped away, leaving only raw desperation and fire. "Sir, what do we do?" Chike asked quietly. Williams stood pacing toward the window. From there, the glittering lights of Lagos sprawled out endlessly. "We fight," he whispered, "not with guns, not yet, but with silence, with secrets. The same way they hunted me, I will hunt them. And Juliana," his voice faltered. He clenched his fist. "Juliana will wish she had never looked into my eyes." Elsewhere, Juliana sat in her dimly lit penthouse. The city skyline shimmered outside, but her eyes were fixed on a small, cracked photo frame in her hands. Inside it was a picture of her as a little girl, smiling beside a woman who looked nothing like the polished, venomous woman she had become. Her mother poor, broken, abandoned. Juliana's jaw tightened. "Never again," she muttered. "Never again will I be powerless." Her phone buzzed. A message. One word. Midnight. She knew who it was, one of her secret allies, hidden in the cracks of Lagos' underworld. Juliana was playing a dangerous game, aligning herself with forces darker than Williams could imagine. But beneath her icy exterior, a crack had formed. Alone, in the silence, she allowed one tear to escape. She hated that it was for Williams, hated that his face still haunted her. That part of her heart still throbbed when she remembered the man who once looked at her not as a pawn, but as a woman. Back at the mansion, the storm finally broke. A fire-smitten, furious erupted in one of the lower wings. Screams of staff filled the air as smoke curled through the corridors. Chike burst into the study. "Sir, fire, we must leave." But Williams did not move. He stood tall, his eyes burning brighter than the flames. "This is no accident," he growled. "This is their message." The crackle of fire spread, the walls groaning as the heat consumed the estate. But Williams remained rooted, his fists clenched, his soul refusing to yield. And in the smoke, a whisper returned to him, a whisper from Juliana. That night, on the balcony, "You can lose everything in one night." Williams finally turned, his voice steel. "Then let the night begin." The fire roared louder, swallowing the walls. But Williams, standing against it, was no longer a man running from his fate. He was a man ready to burn the world to the ground if it meant reclaiming his throne.